Good evening. I'm Stephen Hines, and the chair of Historic Architecture Review Board. I'm going to call the meeting to order of October 11th at 6:04 p.m. Regular monthly meeting, and we have just one project on the agenda, and I think we can quickly go through the minutes if our guests will bear with us just a minute. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes?
Yes.
Has there any changes, any corrections that need to be made? I did see one on page 10, line 4. It was grading. It was written, it should be grating, G-R-A-T-I-N-G. The steel grating, could add the steel in parentheses to make it clear what we were talking about. Okay, thank you. On page, just excuse me, I just got a response from Jeff that he will not be able to make it. So on page 16, there is a line from what Luba was saying at that point, and I think the word is interspersed instead of interspaced is what I saw. But Luba, could you check that and page 16?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me now. But,
okay, fine.
You know, I trust your judgment.
Okay, so those are the only two things I saw that were worth noting. I would ask that
I'll move to accept the minutes with the notation cited by Mr. Hines.
I'll second that then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, minutes are accepted and passed. We can move along and discuss the Prickett Preserve barn. I'd like to start out with just a couple of notes of hopefully clarifying what was reviewed in minutes in the past and how we've been approaching this project, and like to in a way offer apologies for being so picayune it might seem, but I wanted to address our presenters and say that in spite of the fact that sometimes we seem to go beyond what is normally believed to be the historic effect from the road, it's done with the best of intentions. One of the things I might point out is the barn at the old Yardley Tavern or Edgewood Tavern that was Mr. Miller's home, and that he sold, and the developers were in there doing stuff. You know, a number of the things that we talked about might have been a little beyond what our let's say limitations from visual effect from the street, but it was done in a way that we hope made a better project of it for them. I mean, we're concerned that these projects not only look appropriate and are architecturally appropriate from the view of the passerby, but also for the utility of the space. So even though we did get into that discussion, Mr. Harris, I hope you understand I'm not trying to be pushy or anything. I'm trying to do things in a way that you know, maybe points out some of the stuff that actually took to heart and made some adjustments to, because you also considered them concerns. So
Steve, if I might interrupt. For the moderators, it is not on Facebook Live. So if you could check to make sure nothing's going out on the broadcast. Oh, it says just got it. Okay, it's on now.
Okay, well, since that note, I can report that we reviewed the minutes and passed the minutes as accepted. And I was having a little note to the presenters about our best intentions. So if we move on from there, the one other thing I'd like to make note of is that we appreciate the participation and discussion with the developers and the architects who come before us. And we hope that they understand that while we might be seeming to drag things out a little bit, it's only because that if we're moving in a good direction, we'd like to get the best effect and not to try and, shortchange the process. So with that in mind, I invite our presenters to go ahead and start with their presentation tonight. And hopefully we can at least come to some kind of, let's say, direction for them to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say that on behalf of my clients and our consultants, we certainly recognize that the HARB has been acting in good faith. And while we might think that you stretch your authority a little bit, nonetheless, we understand your motivation and we know that it's in good faith. Having said that, we've managed to round up the usual suspects tonight. As you know, my name is Steve Harris. I represent DeLuca, the owner that is the presenter tonight. We have with us Paul Johnson, our architect, who in a moment will go through the revisions that we've made since the last meeting, which we think address the concerns that were raised. We also, I think I mentioned we had Joe DeLuca, we have Paul Johnson, our architect, and we have Jeff Marshall, our barn consultant, historical barn consultant, on the call, all to answer any questions that the board may have. So with that introduction, I would simply turn it over to Paul Johnson, who you all know by now, to go through the revisions that we've made since the last meeting. Paul?
As Steve said, I'm Paul Johnson with Barton Partners, the architect on the project.
You're sounding like you're 1,000 miles away.
Okay, let me scoot in. I'm Paul Johnson, the architect with Barton Partners. Be presenting the Cricket Preserve project tonight. Do I sound okay now? Is it better?
You still sound like you're in a cave. Do you have your mic on?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Better?
Paul Johnson's Earth. Much
Okay.
better.
Thanks, everyone. So we are presenting the Prickett Preserve project tonight. The property was previously owned by the Prickett family. They have been running an antique store out of the property since they purchased it in the 60s. This is the existing barn as it stands today. Just a couple images of the area around the barn. This is the overall Prickett site with the existing barn and existing house of the Prickett family to the left side. This is the overall master plan of the site with the house and barn as the central park location, surrounded by retail with a grocer and apartments, 200 apartment units with a clubhouse to the south of the project. This is an enhanced landscape plan, just demonstrating the open park areas and the landscaping around the general site, with the focus being a public central open space for the barn area between the existing barn and the existing house. This is a close-up of that area and just the landscaping and the park setting that's being created. And just a couple views showing the relationship of the house to the right and the barn to the left. A flipped version of that, the house to the left and the barn to the right, with the retail surrounding the existing barn and park area. We've included the approved land development plan just for reference. As we present the project, we can circle back to this to discuss any of the site elements around the building. These you would have previously seen. These are the first and second floor plans of the existing barn, demonstrating the addition use for a restaurant with outside terrace seating, maintaining the existing entry of the barn and back of house service entry to the restaurant area. This is a general detail of the barn, demonstrating the minimal connection we're trying to make to the existing barn by keeping the new structure of the addition offset from the barn to not bear any weight on the existing barn except for the small tie-in at the new roof where that ties into the existing barn, which is a necessity out of weatherproofing and waterproofing. This is a perspective from the park side of the building, demonstrating the terraced seating areas of the outdoor space for the barn with a wall that opens to connect the inside and the outside of the barn, with the primary focus being creating a glass box around the barn to highlight that the barn is the backdrop of this building, not that the addition is attempting to take over the perspective. This
Paul,
is
if you can go back there for just a
Yep.
minute. One of the comments in earlier meetings was that we had a stone facing on these lower levels, and there was criticism, I think appropriately, that really took away from the barn, the stonework in the barn. And I believe you've changed all of the lower levels to stucco.
That is correct.
As some neutral facing.
Right. So we went with a color palette that is similar to the stone, but we didn't want to try to match the stone to set off the addition versus the existing barn. So you'll see that coming up into this perspective as well, where that will wrap the corner here that is now screened with landscaping. This is from a previous conversation at the last meeting of creating a landscaping buffer to try to soften how the building meets the pedestrian walkway. So we incorporated additional landscaping along this southern portion of the building, which ends up screening some of that lower portion where it'll be the continuing of that stucco around that corner. This is demonstrating that a little further. You can see just kind of transparent some of the trees that will also align with that walkway for shading and just for landscaping around the building. This is the southeastern corner of the building where we have previously pulled back the addition of the building to expose more of the corner of the barn. At the last meeting, it was discussed just that this was a big concrete pad. So in continuing with the softening of the landscaping, we took away some of that concrete to create more of a landscaped area, an opportunity to drop in a sculptural piece, some kind of an art piece. That's really a focal point and a main thoroughfare of the site at this corner. We did want to demonstrate that there are, that we're taking into consideration downspouts and rainwater collection because it needs to exist. So we didn't want to not show something along those lines. So we wanted to keep it off the corner of the building to expose the coins of the existing barn and try to tuck it away to the new addition service entry behind the landscaped area. I also want to point out that we further evaluated the the rendering with the grading with our civil engineer, and we were able to determine that the renderings were misrepresenting the grade to an extent. And in actuality, the grade around the barn is at a lower level than what we were previously showing on slides. So we've actually gained about a 1.5 feet in this area, which brings a little bit more of the barn exposure out. And I'll segue that into, I'll skip ahead and segue into the well area. So the well in actuality will not end up as deep as initially expected. Will be almost at grade at the northern end of the building and dropping to about 42 inches at the southern end of the building. We had discussions of concern of the depth of this well and maintenance. This gives us an opportunity to have a gate access at the north end that's easily accessible for maintenance for trash pickup, leaf cleaning, whatever maintenance needs to be done in that area. It also lessens the drop off into that well.
And Paul, back on that slide, where the gravel is, that's very close, if not at the existing grade.
Correct.
What is at the barn currently. So
we start at the existing grade at the north end, and then this is the build up that we're doing with the approved land development plans to level the site around the building. We're in actuality only losing at this southeastern corner about 42 inches of the existing barn's exposure.
Right. So previously, just to, for contrast, we were at, before what we were showing is that well at the southern end to be about 7.5 feet. And in reality, it's 42 inches or 3.5 feet. Coming to the northern end, it's 8 inches or 6 inches, Paul, that we have.
Yeah, we did a slight step down just to create.
Yeah, from that gate, where before that was, 3 feet, at that end. So using the correct, grades, we feel like, this really has been a nice improvement from the previous presentations.
We had also previously discussed, lowering the curb, raising the railing. We have that at a 42-inch height. We have just a low curb just to divert water out of that area, but to try to ensure that we don't have a climbing situation. Even though it's a smaller drop, it's still a drop that we want to protect that well area. This would be that rear service entry. In previous slides, we were continuing that banding on the left side across this rear entry of the building. We wanted to lighten it up by creating more glass to have less of a connection or less of a solid piece at the barn connection. So this is just a lighter feeling to what we had previously shown in slides. Similar to the north elevation, we just wanted to demonstrate the rainwater control by dropping in the rain leaders, which are connected to the underground system. But we wanted to just demonstrate that they exist and that we're considering a placement for them. And circling back to the well, I do have a diagram here just showing that for reference, the anticipated grades that we have in those areas. We did take a look at what it would take to eliminate the well altogether, to not have a railing, to use a sloped grading from that area. Even with the lesser grades, this diagram on the right shows the slope we would need to maintain, which in the end would only leave us about 3.5 feet of sidewalk along that eastern end of the barn, which functionally won't work for, just the general requirements of having a 5-foot sidewalk, but just also with this being a main thoroughfare, that becomes a fairly tight area. And we think that with the grading of the barn in that well being less than previously shown slides, that the impact of that well and what its screening of the barn is not as impactful as what we previously demonstrated to everyone. These are previous slides that everyone has seen, just demonstrating the visual screening at the table level in the restaurant. You can see that landscaping break incorporating into that area. just to soften that area. And this is the alternate connection of the glass coming up to the existing barn on the original barn addition at the front, towards the front entry of the north end of the building. And then we have updated our night renderings, which you've seen before, to demonstrate the landscaping along that edge, and then the uplighting that we want to provide at the existing barn roof connection to wash the barn wall with light to better demonstrate the barn walls as a kind of glowing focal point at a nighttime setting when this is primarily going to be used. And previously shown renderings of the sun exposure. These reflect the older layout, but the principles are the same and when the shading occurs and where. And then we have updated our materials just to reflect the stucco versus the stone. Previous materials are as you guys have seen previously. So that's everything.
Well, Jennifer, would you like to start?
Actually, I would not.
Okay, well, fine. All right. I guess I will too, because Luba's reticent too, I suspect. A couple of things jump out at me, and I think that it would be good if you could provide the background to the reasoning for your final decisions about how you've adjusted the plan to respond to our comments from last week. I would, if you had a copy of the minutes, I would point you to page 17, where Luba actually went on for a while about how she saw that corner actually being a positive relationship to the extension of the areaway, so that the areaway doesn't have to end with the side wall of, or the south wall of the barn, that it could extend into the space where you've established this visual high point, the sculpture that you mentioned. So it really was kind of poetic in a way, what she was describing, and kind of reminiscent of the work that she did at the Garden of Reflection, for which she received many accolades, and is still quite an impressive scene for people that attend there on 9/11 Remembrance Days. So I think that what you've done is a step in the right direction, but I would really ask you to do that section study that you did from the east wall, showing the areaway and the sidewalk beside it, to extend that a little bit and show what it would look from the south walkway, adjacent to the parking, and then what kind of grades would be involved there, taking it down to about the same height or same depth, let's call it, at the corner of the barn. That it was very instructive to see that once you did it, you found out some things that probably would be worthwhile knowing in terms of developing and coming up with the final plans for the building, which we certainly would like to approve. I think at this point, it's moved hundreds of yards in the right direction. It's almost like an Eagles game. I think we have, at something of a team to address this issue for the benefit of the that taking a look at just what might be involved in creating more of a space
Steve.
that highlights
Hey.
that corner of the barn.
Yeah. Steve, you
Thank you.
froze, your sound and your image froze for a second, so you might have to repeat about the last 30 seconds of what you were
Okay.
trying to get across, just a heads up.
Sure. The point is that by doing a section, you gain a lot of information, and I would like you to proceed with further study to say, just what that really would be in the corner. Maybe the walkway from that service door could turn south. And once you come out to a landing at that door, I mean, it's not a handicap landing. We're just talking about a 4 foot or 5 foot wide walkway that extends from there to the street and the walkway on the south. If you have space between the trees and the edge of the cars, that might be enough of a walkway, and the trees then could kind of step back a little bit closer to the building as well and help provide shade for the side of the building. So anyway, that's one thing. The other thing, and I think I would like a real clear explanation, including what it is entailed by the kind of skylight idea that we discussed in great extent at the last meeting, as a way to separate the edge of a solid construction from the face of the barn, just kind of saying to everybody that sees it, both inside and out, that this glass box is really just touching carefully against it. And I'm very concerned that what is shown in the section is really a full depth attachment to the side of the barn. And even though there's different conditions that'll happen, what with the doors opening there and the spaces between the doors and below the window at the west end of that south wall, those kind of conditions all vary and have a lot to do with how to proceed. But my understanding and my experience with glass roofs is that basically it's just an upper sill that is attached. Granted, it's considerably more expensive, and I understand there might be some resistance to that, but the real effect to that offset is going to be something that sets us apart as what you said it was going to be, something that touches just gently against an older structure and gives it the care and the understanding that we would like to be shared with the public. So that's my my response so far. I'm hoping that the other members of the board might chime in with something.
So I can respond. I can respond to that, just to backtrack to our discussions of that detail. One, as you said, it can be a costly detail. Waterproofing is always the concern when putting glass as a roofing material, especially against a building. We feel from our perspective that in either way, we're attaching some level of flashing to the building to protect that transition point. And from a visual impact, that we're really not having a negative impact one way or the other when you can't perceive it from the exterior ground of the building. That's really more of a detail for an interior perspective, if we can achieve it. And that's the other level of it, that we can't be certain we can achieve it yet, and that there's promising something that we can't deliver on. We know that we can get a solid roof to work. We know that we can get it to work with minimal impact on the building aside from flashing. it will have the same flashing for the skylight, but will have a different thickness just to support the glass, and then have to support the back end of that glass against the barn might actually mean more impact and more mounting to the existing barn.
A section study would be a lot more convincing than just your description. And I think that being visually oriented, we could very easily be convinced. Certainly dealing with the intricate relationships between the conditions of a wall, where there's a door, where there's the wall section between the doors, underneath the window, all those things, have some impact on what we see. And I'm just saying that it would be helpful for all of us, I think, including yourself. So if any of the other members would like to proceed with what I've brought up, or some new information, please speak up.
I'd like, sorry, go ahead, Luba.
No, go ahead, Jennifer.
I wanted to say thank you for responding so thoughtfully to a lot of our comments. It definitely is a lighter look now, losing that masonry foundation base. The amount of glass is great. I am concerned about heat gain in there for you, but that's not our purview. So that'll be a challenge to overcome. I was wondering about, this is just a suggestion. I know the railing at the, I don't know what you want to call it, that swale. The railing, you're showing it as
At the entry?
right at where the grade is dropped down so we can see more of the barn. If we have to have that kind of a railing, perhaps it could be the same color as what you're showing on the fascia soffit of the addition, just so it sort of goes away more.
We could certainly, similar to maybe Jennifer, the color tone of the downspout.
Right.
Something a little bit more earth tone than black.
Right.
Not black. Yes.
Right. I think that would go a long way to kind of just having it disappear a little bit. I don't know if you have a landscape designer on your team already, but the idea of exploring the cutout and maybe repositioning the walkway to the service entrance, that would be nice, but I feel that is beyond our set of guidelines and what we can really comment on. So this is like a suggestion. Adding the green and the public art is a wonderful thing to do for any public space, so that's great. I'm concluding. That's it. Thank you.
Well, I could add some comments, and would be again, it's a nice improvement. It's going in the right direction. The design, the couple of things that I still don't see resolved is actually that original point that Jennifer had said about the connection. And I really don't like to get back to the same thing, but it's how the glass is articulating with the masonry, with the barn structure. Right now, when we look at that fascia, it's just going right straight into the wall. It's almost like you have a cube, and the cube is not really, doesn't know where to go. It can slide either way. Is that downspout holding it there? So if we would have just even a small reveal going inside, so it would create a break where this building is an independent glass and is barely attached. It's a butterfly touching a flower, or a butterfly touching the barn, doing the same thing on both sides. that connection that we have been talking about it for, quite a while. I don't think structurally that would be a major issue, just having that fascia breaking and then going an indentation in and then connecting to the stone. So that was one. Yeah.
If I can respond to that, we did start with a smaller indentation of like a 12 by 12 square just to create a smaller recess. And
Right.
through our discussions, it has evolved into something larger through our various hard meetings to this
Right.
point. And that is how we have gotten to this point, was from previous input.
But
Okay.
you still
Paul,
have to get, you
I
still have
think
to get,
Oh, sorry.
maybe I missed that.
Okay, Luba, let me help or maybe hinder, but let me expand on what you said and suggest that looking at where the downspouts come down, it seems like it might just be more of a problem. I mean, you said you were keeping it back from the corner to allow for the coins to be visible. I think if it were just to the right of the door on that south wall, the easternmost door, you might achieve the same end as you have now, getting rid of the water from the roof, which I think was the main issue that sponsored this move. But that would also give a possible opportunity to take that eastern fascia and bring it back, even if you have the door step back, have the fascia step back just at the wall. So continue the line all the way back till you get to that indentation that I think Luba was looking for. Does that make sense, Luba?
Yes. I don't think that downspout there really adds anything to the design, really.
I'm with you on the downspout. I'd say I'm still not clear on that connection detail.
the problem, we moved that whole section back to expose that section of the wall, but that's the entrance that gets down, the service entrance that gets downstairs to the kitchen. So there's a limit as to how far it can be set back. If I'm understanding what the comment was, I mean, we could pull the front portion up further, but that seems to be counterproductive. But there's a limit to how far back the service door can be and still access the stairs now that we've moved the whole section back away from the corner.
Okay, I think that keeping the door in a section of wall and framing that is set back from the glass kind of makes diagrammatic sense, design sense as well. But having the fascia be continuous, even extending out just a little bit further over the glass, coming out toward the eastern exposure here a little bit further, and having it continuous all the way back to the wall, except for this little indentation that I think
Right.
you're looking for, and have so kind of making it end up being the same depth back as the door could be something of that carrying out that suggestion in a more formal way. So the glass wall's there, the door steps back, but the fascia continues till it gets to the point where you want to highlight the break, the intersection, and that becomes that 1 foot offset or 8-inch offset, whatever it has to be to achieve what you're looking for.
I guess my question to Paul is, do you understand what they're suggesting?
I mean,
What it sounds like is previous renderings that we've displayed.
well, Paul, and Mr. Chairman, let me take a stab at it too, as we try to sort through, Luba's comments and explanation. We're going to relocate the downspout to the other side of the doors. You want that ribbon to go continuous, so there'll be an 8 to 12 inch overhang in front of the door. There's no turning back that ribbon to intersect with the building. That just goes straight across and the door remains set back.
Yes,
No, there is a little setback of the fascia.
at the
Okay,
very
that's-
point
I
where it
think
hits the building.
Okay, that's where I think, at least I'm confused then. What I was hearing was that fascia goes all the way across. The glass wall is in one plane. There's a setback, whether it's 8, 12 inches, for where the glass wall, where the entrance door is, but that fascia would continue in a straight line and doesn't have any return, just the door is set back.
Well, I think my point was just the fascia has the little setback there. So you would create a detachment from that cube, would be sort of standing by itself and just barely, you see the fascia in the back. And it doesn't have to be anything large. I don't know, that piece of glass that you see next to the door, what is that, 8 inches there between the
About,
glass and
yeah.
the stone wall?
Roughly, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, like something like that, even a foot of that fascia breaking in and connecting them to the stone. Now, I don't know the downspout, do you have room to move the downspout inside on the bottom?
Mm,
Somebody said there was a stair there, some steps.
Yeah.
No,
No,
No?
I think having it on the outside makes sense.
yeah,
Laura.
and to connect to the roof drains.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Paul,
I
do
had
you,
it, yeah, I'm sorry.
no, I was going to say, I was just want to again make sure that we're clear on the fascia on how you want that to feel.
I think we're genuinely confused.
Yeah,
Are you suggesting eliminating, are you suggesting that the wall should be, that wall that we're looking at right now should be flat and the door shouldn't be set back and there shouldn't be an 8-inch glass space between the dining room wall and the stairwell or the stairway, I mean, the door well?
No, the suggestion is to keep everything exactly the way you're showing it here with the glass and the door. And it appears that the fascia right now, above that door is, I don't know, whatever, a foot over. Maybe that the glass door is recessed, something. I don't know.
let me jump to the plan because we might be after what we're already demonstrating there. Zoom in here. Oop. So this is that area that we're talking about, and we do have and maybe it's not representing in the renderings, but that door is set back 1 foot from the face of that wall. We might just be on the perfect angle where it's not reading as such. So this door to the right is actually 1 foot back from this glass panel here, and that roof starts to pull back with it to create some kind of a visual setback there.
But
Okay, I think that's the point, Paul, where
Yeah.
we do not have the roof set back at that point, but only when it gets close enough to the barn to make a statement about we are breaking it back at that point to create that.
Along this line.
Exactly.
Right,
Exactly.
right. At
Exactly.
that line.
Talking about the vertical depth of the fascia, not the recess of it. The height of the fascia.
No,
no,
Okay, that's what-
no, they're saying continue, as I understand it, saying continue
This comes
the
across.
existing line and then leaving a break of the last 6, 8 inches before the wall.
You're
Okay,
essentially
Paul, I think
notching
you
out
got
those
it.
last 8 inches or so.
Paul, I think you got it.
Yeah, right where John was showing with the arrow.
That's the idea. Break it
Yep.
at that point.
Right.
Okay.
And that becomes the setback to the glass that's around the door,
Yeah, it goes back there. Yeah. Mhm.
all the way to the glass. So it's in
Right.
the same plane. because it doesn't really need that much of an overhang there.
It'll
Right.
keep you a little drier when you're trying to open the door if it's raining out, right?
All right, I think we're all on the same page.
Fine.
And then I have another comment about the well. I really don't see, I mean, I'm really glad that now the height is reduced to be able to still appreciate this, the stone of the barn. I'm not sure that we really need to have that well from corner to corner. Actually, when you look at that perspective in the corner, it's kind of also a weak connection between the rail and maybe, a few inches from that corner. I don't know how far is that window that is in the well. Maybe that wall can be, the well can be pushed more inside on both sides. My feeling is it has to be from corner to corner of the barn. So that would be one point. And then the other one is, like right now it looks like, I don't know, gravel or something. Still, could we possibly have a step there? So it wouldn't look just like a straight well. It would be, you have the drain close to the stone and then having, maybe one step and, it would slope to the area that is lower or no step, and go, it would be adjusted accordingly to the topography. Less of a well, I feel it would, still showcase the stone and the, the scale of the barn, but it wouldn't look very artificial, like it was just created because, somebody with no reason.
You're thinking terracing within the well itself?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
a very simple one,
And-
like giant
and-
step.
Paul, what's the width of that walkway? It looks to me like about 10 feet, 12 feet.
We're around 10 feet. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it were 8 feet, would that be a big problem? And then the last 2 feet could be that step that Luba is kind of suggesting might help make it a little less of a drop off. And even if you continue to have the railing just to keep people out, having the idea of, we're letting more light in to an areaway. I
Yeah.
did have another question in that areaway, that the windows that are in there are full height windows, aren't they? Or they the
They're-
same?
Paul, you
They're
could go
not,
back,
yeah.
go back to the pictures.
Yeah.
The other side of the building would have the full height windows. These are the windows we're looking at on that side.
Oh, okay. So then we won't have to do any stone infill or stucco or something that underneath. Okay, thank you.
And the bottom of that window well is really following the existing grade that's there now.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So,
Getting rid of railings would actually be a help in a way, if it's not too steep of the drop offs kind of thing.
So-
And
Well-
required for safety.
What,
Yeah, and starting that well, not at the corner, that would also open up that space where somebody's proposing to have a green area with the sculpture. It won't be just
Yes.
like the narrow little walkway.
Yes.
So if I can ask, you're suggesting that rather than wrap the well around the south corner, you would actually step the retaining wall back towards the
Yes.
window.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
on both sides. Mhm.
Is that the opposite of what Jennifer said earlier about extending the well to beyond the south wall?
Yeah, that would shorten the well and
Right.
and make it, if I'm listening, that you're suggesting that if you moved the well and made it like 2 feet wider, you might put steps in there instead of a straight down straight down retaining wall, and then you'd pull it back in from both of the corners to reduce the size of it. You keep the windows, but you would get less of an impact.
Yes, well said. Mhm.
Yeah, but Steve, the
Thank
thing
you.
is, on the easterly side, we're gonna still need a wall, a retaining, whether it's part of the well or a retaining wall. Right, we could create steps coming in from, the south side, the step that
And the
down.
north side. And the north side.
The north side's 8 inches, that's a step as it is.
Yeah.
But you're gonna still need a wall on the easterly side. Because, I mean, there's a 3.5 different foot in elevation. Right, so, I mean, we're gonna need, some type of railing there to prohibit, anybody from just, falling over that edge.
Okay, we're getting into landscape design, and
Well,
as Jennifer
I mean,
pointed
part
out,
of-
it's off
really
of
part of the facade of the building that we're trying to,
Yeah,
to
open and allow to
well,
see.
it is open, and one of the things that we did come up with that, the well is a lot less and it's a lot more shallow than what it
Mhm.
was before. So again, in the pedestrian area, quite honestly, I thought that was a pretty good, a pretty good find that happened between last meeting and this meeting, and looking for that to hopefully get us over, the hump here. So
Joe, if I could ask, the 10-foot wide walkway, or approximately 10-foot wide walkway, is that a section where we had, part of the larger development, there was talk about shutting down the street and
Exactly.
doing some stuff on the sidewalks. Is that particular location set up for that too?
yes, so
It's a dual
all
use.
this,
Okay.
yeah, so Dan, and that's a good point. All this parking that is adjacent to the barn area or between building 4 and the barn and building 2, all that parking and all that sidewalk is at the same elevation. So there were visions of, when we were developing this community or central area, that this could be shut down for certain events, and everything was on the same grade.
So you might set up street vendors and stuff like
Sure.
that, and then
Yeah.
use the, okay.
Yeah, whether small festival, music,
Right.
street vendors, those types of, community events.
Well, to summarize, I think we've achieved an awful lot in terms of the setback of the glass wall from the corner, and how that whole corner develops could actually be open to further discussion, further presentations, both to us and to the supervisors. But in general, I think we've gotten to the point where everybody's on the same page for how to proceed. It would be helpful to get a sense of the board with a understanding of our agreement with your concept and the way it's proceeding, and then come up with the details so that we can do a final sign off when the plans are to the point where they are, let's say, 80% of construction
Yeah.
documents.
I mean, Steve, you want to take that one, or?
Well, is
or
it
me.
possible to we've identified, it seems to me, several conditions. I mean, the only real no that we have is the glass skylight. We just believe that we can't promise something that we don't know that we can deliver. But at the same time, if there was a motion to recommend a certificate of appropriateness with the revisions that we just discussed to the entrance, the service entrance door, B, with the idea that rather than a flat surface in the well, that it be stepped down, that the downspout be moved outside or beyond, if you will, those wooden doors, that the railing around the well would be painted in an earth tone to match the downspouts, and that the ends of the well would be pulled, I'll say, in. Would that be something that could be achieved tonight? I mean, obviously, we're anxious, as you can imagine, to get onto the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors still has to look at all those issues. We've got Mr. Grenier, who's your liaison, who's very familiar with them. I suspect that the Board of Supervisors have some views on this too, and if it's possible, with those conditions, all of which I believe, Joe, you'll confirm would be acceptable to the developer. If we can move on to the Board of Supervisors, that would be greatly appreciated.
Mhm. May I add one more item? It would be to treat the opposite side of the building, opposite that service door, make that fascia run straight as well, and then have that do the same kind of
Setback.
Yeah,
turn.
that would certainly be acceptable.
Yes.
All right, let me deal with the housekeeping, I guess. With other plans, in particular in the historic village where we are established to do what we do, the plans that are acceptable for final approval are ones that have all the details and are part of the building permit process. I'd ask Mr. Majewski to weigh in on this, but since this is something that is beyond our normal bailiwick, that this might have a special approach to how we proceed. And I don't want to suggest that we can accommodate your request, but I think if Mr. Majewski might have some kind of input, it might help clarify for our process.
Thank you, Steve. My camera's not working, so I apologize for that. This is a process that's somewhat different than the Historical Architectural Review Board's purview of all the buildings that are within the historic district. Although I think a lot of the things that were thought of by the Board of Supervisors when they did the ordinance was that you guys would have the ability to review this and offer the suggestions as you had to come up with a product that was worthy of what would be approved in the historical district of Lower Makefield Township in Edgewood Village. So procedurally, I think you could be fine making a motion to recommend that approval. One thing that you may want to do is though make that recommendation that when they do have the building plans finalized, should the Board of Supervisors approve the certificate of appropriateness, that they maybe come back to you just to finalize that to make sure that it complied with what you were looking at.
So, and Jim, if I may draw a parallel, one, I think you're relative to, as someone who did a lot of question asking during and writing during the ordinance write-up, right? I think the intent is indeed to mimic the historic district with respect to HARB's review of this, this particular site and buildings. So that's absolutely, I agree with that. In terms of, conditional approvals, I see this, similar to conditional approval of a site plan, right? You give it, we can vote on an approval of a site plan with conditions of, like, the developer will comply with XYZ conditions that are written into eventually into a developer's agreement, et cetera. So as long as HARB is, two main reasons we wanted to make sure that HARB had a played a key role in this. One is to maintain the visual aesthetic of the historic resources that are here, so we didn't have a negative impact on the view shed. Even if we are doing something that is more modern, it still plays into it, generally speaking. And two, that we can ensure the integrity of the buildings in the long term, right? We don't want any damage to the buildings. After that, it's good ideas and thoughtfulness, and not necessarily under the same umbrella, but it's still worthy conversations. And I think I'll let the Harb decide if we're there yet or not, but I think there's been some great back and forth between Harb and the developer team. I think everyone's kept an open mind, had great recommendations and good open discussions, and that's everyone's benefited from that. So if Jim, if you think it's appropriate to similar, like I said, similar to a site plan approval, where there is the potential to issue or vote to recommend approval of a certificate of appropriateness with those conditions that Mr. Harrison and Ms. Stark added there at the end, coupled with the condition that you added there. I think the board, I think, would be willing to address that. And then if the developer team, when this comes in front of the board, can make sure that those issues have been addressed by the time it gets to the Board of Supervisors, so that everyone can see it. And if the Harb's watching that, they can chime in and say, yes, that's exactly what we wanted to see. That would also be helpful, that we don't, basically this presentation is updated to match those conditions ahead of a Board of Supervisors meeting. I think that brings it to a much better place. Jim, any thoughts on that? I know I'm rambling a little bit, but.
Well, so was I. But the way you laid it out is exactly what I was kind of trying to envision, that you'd make a motion if the board was so inclined to approve a certificate of appropriateness subject to the changes as outlined by Mr. Harris, Ms. Stark, and also to, I don't know if you want to put any other conditions on it, like have them come back to you with the final details, or if you're just comfortable that they could do that and we can circulate it around informally, that'd be up to you, but I think that would be appropriate.
My only
All right,
correction,
let
Jim,
me-
my only
let me-
correction, Jim, is it's a recommendation for approval, not an approval.
Thank
It
you.
is, right, it's a recommendation. Let me make a couple of comments about what I particularly see as to help with the recapitulation of all of we've discussed. Starting from the very beginning, going back, since I've reviewed the minutes again today, just to make sure I got them all. One of the things that was discussed, and I think has been a major sticking point to some extent, when we were talking about how the new building comes up against the existing barn. It was noted a number of times that we would like to see it done in a way that would make the barn sacrosanct in a way, and whatever we did could be undone. And I think that is something that has led to a number of things, not only visually, but functionally. And that's what was discussed earlier by Paul about the offset of the structure, etc. I think that in two cases, I would like to consider that perhaps the main point, the number one issue that would have to be addressed by the final drawings. The issue of how you flash this into the barn, and if a glass reveal would be a doable thing and worth the effort. You know, to my mind, obviously, since I've been harping on it for a while, it is. But the fact that if there is a section at that point that says, here's how we are touching the barn, and this is how it could be undone. That would be a critical part of the answer that we would have to have in order to make the recommendation. And it's an understood caveat. So the second part of that is that since pulling back the corner of the glass box that would have a story underneath it, most likely, and certainly having the stairs go down would keep whatever structure, whatever earth surcharge away from the wall of the building. That can't be said about the earth that we would put in there to create the green space that we have said is very desirable and something that we were looking and saying that, yeah, that's a nice solution for that corner. So again, I think that the idea of Luba's dropping whatever grade level there is in that area down to almost the grade of the existing earth as it is now, then we would be taking away any possibility of having a surcharge, a side load on those stone walls below the new grade. So if that can be addressed in what we do for the resolution of that corner, I think that that would also go forward. But I think, again, rule number one would be to respect that consideration that we do no damage, leave no trace, as the scouts are wont to say when we get to a campsite. Whatever we have here, we take it with us and we leave it as pristine as it was before. The other issues, the other suggestions that were made tonight, I think are very valid ones, and certainly as Mr. Harris put it together, it makes some sense. And I think that in general, we can ask for some kind of motion to approve the design as it is, with the conditions that we've stated, and that be circulated in terms of the minutes and any other documentation that Mr. Harris might want to present to us as his understanding or the understanding of DeLuca, so that we can move along with, yeah, these are the conditions and this is our vote of approval for the project. Any thoughts from the other members?
Steve, are you suggesting that the glass connection along the entire length of the addition is what you want to add to the conditions?
I would like a study to say what the difference would be between pushing or putting the actual roof and the roof structure up against the barn, and what that would look like in terms of a simple solution, you know, with readily available materials, not coming up with something custom, but something that says, here's what the impact would be if we had the glass, here's what the impact would be now that we're going with the idea of the roof tight to the wall. And I think that's something that we've been asking to be addressed, and I would like to see it addressed. It's certainly not going to change the look and shouldn't have anything to do with what we decide tonight.
I don't know if I can add that to a motion, simply because the way that the interior of the space is treated and what's happening at the ceiling, you're expecting someone standing inside the space to be able to look up, skim the wall, the stone wall, and then see through at that glass connection, right?
that would be the point of doing the exercise of seeing if it were possible. This is should be a simple design idea that could be easily investigated with half a day's work.
But doesn't the fact that, I mean, again, and I understand what you're saying about, investigating, but we're concerned about, promising something that we can't accomplish, and B, the whole point of washing that wall with light in the evenings is to highlight the barn to the entire area around the barn. Isn't that accomplishing what it is that you're seeking to achieve? That the barn, that the masonry, the barn, the structure of the barn is going to be featured in the design, the development of this adaptive reuse.
No, and believe me, I understand the point. I want to make sure that this is not a design idea from my point of view and something I wish to carry it on. The reason I started out with do no damage to the existing structure was to see if either of those techniques, one where you take a roof structure and you run it tight to the wall, or the other to have a glass separator. It could even be a metal separator. It might not be glass. It could be something of the typical reglet and expansion joint that exists with roofs that are constructed at different times and different nights, and has the ability to act in different manners with different side forces that would shift the relationship. So given that, that's the only reason I suggest, more than suggest, I'm looking for some kind of study that says, yes, if we put a solid roof up against the wall of the barn, we are not going to create a problem if we decide down the road to remove this. I don't know why they would do that, but let's say.
But Mr. Chairman, if I could just say one thing, whether it's glass, metal, or otherwise, there's a connection to the barn. So even if it's glass and at some point it's removed, that connection's removed. So there's no negative impact, whether it's metal or glass connection to the barn, because they're going to be fastened to the barn through some type of riglet and, flashing detail.
I think that the point that the chairman is making is that the design should minimize any impact to the barn, so that in the event that the building was removed, the damage to the barn would be minimized. And I think that's a reasonable goal.
Just so. And that's the reason that I suggest the study. And each of those processes have a different manner of construction. And my experience is that one has a greater impact than the other. And I'm asking that that be looked into as part of the whole process of keeping the impact on the side walls of that barn, especially on the south side, to be under, studied thoroughly before we finally build it. And because right now, the rest of the structure is going to be, approved, is if everybody goes along with this tonight, all the members, then you're going to go along, and we'd like to see that review before we, give it the final blessing. Once you have all the drawings done, and we say, yeah, you've done your best. And I think that's all we're looking to, is get the best situation we can.
Mr. Hines, if I can say it this way, so as I was saying before, the two main things that we're really concerned about are I don't want to oversimplify this, but this will sound like oversimplification, right? The visual aesthetic of the barn, maintaining that. And then in addition to that, maintaining the structural integrity of the barn and doing no damage. So when you come before the Board of Supervisors and, we're talking about your connection to the barn, you're going to explain how it's connected and what it looks like. And then somebody, if they, it'll be me if nobody else, say, okay, how are you minimizing potential impacts to the physical structure of the barn? Can you explain that to us? And is this, based on everything you've looked at, why are you doing it this way? That way you'll be able to answer the question. If it's a study, the way Mr. Hines is talking about, that may be the best way to do it. But it's really that the very basic question or comment that we would make at this level is just prove it to me. You know what I mean? Just show it to me and let the board understand exactly how you're going to minimize any potential impact to the barn in the event that that's the new structure is going to be separated from the barn at some point in the future.
There's going to be the necessity of a connection.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking to that connection be the minimal connection that we can propose and still have everything being structurally sound.
I would agree with that from my perspective, yes.
And then, excuse me, just if I may, and Mr. Hines added at the last part of his conversation, it's not a conversation between glass and roof. It is the least intrusive method possible that you're interested in.
Yes.
Okay, that's a different conversation we've had earlier, and I think it's a much more important one based on reversibility, which is what we're talking about. Okay.
And if I may, I think Mr. Harris summarized it pretty well earlier about making it the minimal impact on the building, the way he had phrased it earlier.
Yes.
He was very eloquent. He should be a lawyer or something like that.
Well, Mr. Grenier, I'm also an engineer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I graduated from Lehigh as a chemical engineer.
Oh,
so don't hold that against me. But seriously,
two strikes.
Yeah, we would greatly appreciate a motion to recommend a certificate of approval to the Board of Supervisors based upon the conditions that I outlined and that were supplemented by this continued discussion.
Anyone care to make that motion?
I'll make the motion, and I pity the recording secretary who's going to have to pluck comments from 4 people. But yes, thank you.
Is that a so moved? Do we have a second?
Second.
So at this point, it is up for, without further discussion, up for voting. All in favor, say aye.
See, before you do that,
Oh,
can you
have it
check for public comment just in case?
Public comment. That's sorry. Yeah.
No public comment online.
Thank you for reminding me, Mr. Grenier. Do you have any further comment, Mr. Grenier?
I'll just, we're past the hour here pretty far. So all I want to say to the HARB especially is thank you for your diligent review and your thoughtful comments and ideas. I think,
that's for after the vote. So, okay.
No, I want to put this to bed.
Okay.
So I think what you've done is great. So good meeting tonight.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Aye. But the motion carries 3-1. Unfortunately, Jeff was not here to participate in it, but maybe he's thanking his lucky stars. So yes, it's been a process, but I think that in the meantime, we've highlighted a few things that have been addressed very nicely.
Steve, I hate to cut you off, but they do need to get to the next meeting and start letting
Okay.
everyone into the room. So
I
sorry to cut
lost
you
track
off.
of time. So
No problem.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
thank you. Can
Thank
I
you.
ask for
Thank you.
Motion to
motion-
adjourn.
a motion to adjourn? Okay, a second. Aye, all in favor?
Aye.
Yay. Thank you again, 7:25, and thanks for your participation, Luba, Jen. Good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.